That's the focus of this edition of At Issue. Welcome to At Issue, a program that explores the issues and people that affect and concern Long Islanders. Hello, everyone. I'm Lee Tyrell. From slavery to civil rights and other major events in African American history are what students at Uniondale High School are learning all about. However, the lessons are not coming from books. News 12 Long Island's Ken Grimble shows us how the kids are celebrating Black History Month.
Get on board, little children, get on board. Little children, get on board.
Songs like these portray the suffering of slaves during those dark days in American history.
No second class aboard this train, no difference in the fare. Get on board.
Students at Uniondale High School are taking part in a Black History Month program.
A lot of these spirituals had double meanings, signifying essentially the African Americans' escape from slavery. Like the gospel train, they were telling everyone to come on board. There's no fare, indicating the Underground Railroad, Harriet Tubman, and all those movements.
The precision of Uniondale's United Steppers drew a lot of attention from the audience. Deandra Johnson says the team beat out 8 other groups at a recent competition.
Stepping came from our ancestors. They used stepping as a form of dance to praise God. And us, the United Steppers, we take that and we step and we do what we do.
But they had to go through many years of hardship.
Yes, right? Yes.
And what are your feelings about that today as African American?
I feel blessed that I have to go through all that stuff, and I'm proud to be an American and be free.
Now what you hear is not a lie, it's nothing but the truth. Because we African American have learned our history through.
This is only the second year the school has had a program like this, and it was done to remind these young people of the plight of the Black people here in America. In Uniondale, Ken Grimble, News 12, Long Island.
And joining me today to celebrate Black History Month is Legislator Kevan Abrahams. Kevan represents the 1st Legislative District in Nassau County and is the youngest African-American elected official in New York State. Also from the African-American Media Center in Roosevelt, you also might recognize him from public access television, Andreas 13. And from Hofstra University, Dr. Alan Singer. Gentlemen, thank you very much for coming in and joining us for this celebration of Black History Month every February, as we do across New York and the rest of the country. Doctor, I want to ask you, if we go back to the history, some people might be surprised to realize that we've actually celebrated Black History Month or Week in some form all the way back in 1926, which then it was known as Negro History Week.
Well, what happens is Carter Woodson is a historian in the beginning of the 20th century. Just starts to promote African American history as a serious topic, and he's really the pioneer. For me, African American history, Black history, is American history. It's Long Island history. It needs to be taught everywhere. I think one of the problems that we have is it's taught as a separate subject when it is taught, and it's not really integrated into all aspects of American history. You can't understand the history of the United States without understanding African American history.
Well, if you think about going back to 1926, and you're talking about Carter Woodson, people might not even realize he was born to former slaves and wound up getting a PhD from Harvard.
Yes.
When the celebration or the notation of Negro History Week started back in the 1920s, it wasn't even being taught. I mean, it wasn't included in history books. Negro history was not anywhere at that time that
it's
anybody was studying.
It's still not taught today. How many people in Long Island realize, in New York realize, that there's slavery on Long Island until 1827?
I'm sure a lot wouldn't.
At the time of the American Revolution, about 20% of the population of Long Island were enslaved Africans. Searingtown, Smithtown, Hicksville are all named after families that owned African slaves. The South Fork is settled by plantation owners from Barbados who are bringing up enslaved Africans to work on their plantations here to gather raw materials to ship back. So slavery is at the center of the formation of Long Island, yet we don't even know it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back to my own elementary education and my own middle school education, and realizing that the only thing we were really taught about when it came to African American history was really slavery and a couple of notable African Americans and their inventions, but not much more than that, unless you specifically went into college and took an African American studies course.
Look, race remains at the center of our lives on Long Island today. There are over 120 schools school districts on Long Island, and they tend to be racially, ethnically, and economically segregated. We still live with the legacy of the problems of race. In the 1920s, Long Island was a major center of the Ku Klux Klan. As a matter of fact, the New York State grand titan of the Klan was from Malvern. He was a real estate developer called Linder. It wasn't until the 1960s that it was exposed. Up until the 1960s, there was an elementary school in Malvern named after him. In the 1960s, in Malvern was one of the leading communities in the United States fighting against school desegregation. Norman Lent, who was the state senator, pushed for a New York State amendment, a federal constitutional amendment to outlaw school busing. So Long Island and the issues of race have been at the center of our history. They're not being taught.
Kevan, do you remember being taught about African American history when you were, growing up?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, pretty much through my elementary years and going through high school and college, I remember being taught African American history for a large extent.
Was it enough?
No, I don't think so. I think it had a heavy concentration probably the month of February.
Right.
But it wasn't to the degree where it should be. I think it was pretty much, at the face value. We learned about Frederick Douglass, we learned about Martin Luther King, but we didn't learn, and we learned about Harriet Tubman, but we didn't learn about a lot of other people, Booker T. Washington, and other individuals that had a contribution to this country.
Andres, what about you?
Well, when I was graduating from high school, I had a teacher, Mr. Walchuk. And he indicated to me, and I indicated to him, that there were things that were untrue in my history book that he had taught me out of for the 11th grade and the 12th grade.
What was it specifically? Do you remember?
It stated that the majority of the people in the world were Caucasian, and the TV and the press were making a big thing about China had reached 3 billion. So I had asked Mr. Walchuk, I said, well, if there are 3 billion people in China and they're not considered Caucasians, why is this book saying that the predominant race is Caucasian? He said the book is lying.
Is that what he said? Really?
He said the book is lying, Andreas, and I can't explain why. And then he failed me. So I had to go to summer school to get the half credit and graduate.
So you were an agitator even then.
So after that, I said that I can't believe what is written in these books that I've been taught till the 12th grade. So at that point, I proceeded to hang around the people who later formed Public Enemy, Professor Griff and Norman Rogers, Terminator X, and they were into martial arts. And one thing that they did do in teaching people martial arts, they taught them African history. And that later led to Public Enemy and their rise. But that's where I got my first taste that you actually have to go find books written by African scholars and find people who study that history. And if you remember, not too long ago, Leonard Jeffries was lambasted for his curriculum of inclusion, which a lot of African American students said that they weren't interested in learning about all these things in America because it really didn't tell what they did, other than you were a slave, you were brought here, and then you were set free. So I think that the journey began for me to find out, well, what did these people do before they were enslaved and brought to this country? And then you find out the wealth of African history that they had.
So now, all these years later, we have Black History Month, and then right in the middle of that, we've got Dr. King's birthday, which is celebrated as a national holiday. And I think what a lot of people are hoping it's doing, Kevan, is bringing, Ken Grimble said at the end of his story there before, to bring focus on the plight of the African American in the United States. But is that, would you like it to get beyond that? Would you like it to be a celebration of African American culture? Would you like it to be a way of learning more about how African Americans have contributed to U.S. history? Does it need to be more than it is now?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely needs to be more than what it is now. It also, I believe, should be a reflection process of where African Americans are currently, not just in this country, but let's focus right in our county and in Long Island, this region, in terms of where we are with health disparities, where we are with education. I mean, obviously, African Americans have made many strides in terms of going in a positive direction. But at the same time, we're still lagging, especially when it comes to health care and education and many other things that the African American people suffer from. So I think we should also use it as an opportunity to reflect and see how we're going to go forward as a race as well.
Well, Dr. Singer, is African American History Month doing anything to help people recognize?
Teachers who are interested It gives them a
as a
vehicle.
tool.
Let me give you an example. At Hofstra, we were developing a curriculum guide for the teaching on slavery in New York. And what we did is we focused on complicity and resistance. Now, a lot of these lessons were developed with schools in Westbury and in Uniondale, but also schools that participated were in Hicksville. But teachers were able to draw from this to use all sorts of different materials to focus on their classes. But one of the big focuses we made was on resistance, because we felt, and not just myself, but all the people who participated, that kids had to know that there's a history of struggle for freedom. On Long Island, in Long Island's history, there's a man by the name of Inter Smith, who's an African, who's kidnapped, who's sold into slavery, lives in the Hamptons. He escapes. He gets recaptured. He purchases his freedom. He frees his family. He frees his children. He fights for his humanity. We want kids to know about this history of struggle, that there is resistance to slavery by ordinary people.
All right, I want to take a break, and I want to talk more about how we teach that in the schools when we come back. Celebrating Black History Month on Long Island is the focus of this edition of At Issue. More when we come back. Stay with us.